I became a stripper because if the world is set up in this way that I am going to be exploited for my femme body, I want control over that. I want to exploit the system that seeks to exploit me. If this is what we're given, we need to turn that around and make it work for us. I'm gonna unionize.
That's a former exotic dancer over at Star Garden in Los Angeles. And she and her coworkers are doing their best to create a union for this strip club as a result of the way that they've been treated at work, as a result of the abuse that they faced, and as a result of the terrible pay that they've received for the job that they do. Now, the dancers voted to unionize with Strippers United in late April. Now they're asking the owners of Star Garden to recognize the union. The dancers wanted to form a union for two main reasons. Reason number one, for their safety. Let's watch.
I was fired for bringing up a safety concern about a customer. I saw red flags and I was concerned that things were accelerating in an alarming way that could lead to obsession. I saw red flags of like possessiveness.
When I brought up my concerns to the manager on duty that night, he mocked me to my face, telling me that I was going to be murdered by that customer and how I was going to be murdered by him. Probably shot, as the security guard predicted.
They addressed us as a group and said, you're not allowed to go straight to security. If you have any safety issues, you have to go through the management and we'll decide if we think it's a good enough reason to get security involved.
They're also concerned about how the compensation works. We'll get to that in a moment, but I think that video and what they're sharing with us deserves some comment. I mean, if you have a security concern, you're not allowed to directly go to the security guard with that concern. So who exactly is protecting these women who are placed in an incredibly vulnerable position by their employer?
All our lives we've been told that you should be ashamed of sex and anything related to sex. And so if you're an exotic dancer or any sex worker of any kind, we've all been taught shame.
So yeah.
But first of all, sex is the single most natural thing that a human can do.
Just ask a Republican politician. Many of them have been caught in sex scandals, so they should know.
Yeah. But yet we are never told that abusing your employees is not shameful. Or is shameful. We're never told that keeping wages low is shameful. We're never told that not giving people health care is shameful because they would die without health care. How come we're never told that corporate abuses are deeply, deeply shameful? How come we never see those bosses or corporate executives or whoever they are lined up? We used to do this in the past before bribery. We would sometimes, like the SNL scandal. I remember that from the 1980s. At least back then, when the bankers committed crimes, they'd do a perp walk and there'd be some degree of shame involved. But the Supreme Court had just legalized bribery in the late 1970s. Now that we're in peak bribery, there's no shame at all for the people at the top, no matter how much they abuse their workers. There's only shame for random things like sex.
But the thing that this is, obviously, it's got a sad component to it because these are workers who are being abused by the patrons of the strip club, and then they receive no protection by their employer. In fact, their employer crushes them. But the positive thing is they don't see themselves as helpless victims. They see themselves as fighters. And so I want the focus to be on that because they're incredibly courageous. They're speaking out. They've already voted to form this union. And they're in Los Angeles, meaning they're in California, which tends to have better labor laws, especially for employees who have voted to unionize. So I'm hopeful that they're going to get the justice and the pay that they deserve. And speaking about pay, that is the second reason why they decided to join this union. So let's hear what they had to say about that.
It's a little bit more complicated in California with the passage of AB 5, which classifies strippers as employees instead of independent contractors. Because the strip club model was not built to support an employee relationship with the owners. A lot of clubs in California as a whole have made some really shady adjustments, like, okay, well, we'll give you minimum wage, but we're going to take 50% of your lap dances now. Or we'll give you minimum wage, but you have to pay a flat rate of $200 now to come in and work. So they're essentially compensating themselves for having to pay you minimum wage, and dancers actually end up making less money.
It's just stealing their wages, stealing their money. That's what that is. That's the easiest way to explain it. So forming a union is really the only way that they can get past the classification that they're dealing with, which puts them at a disadvantage pay-wise. Why would they have to pay to work? That defeats the purpose of working.
I know why. Because the strip club owner thinks, I'm not making enough money. I should get a higher percentage of the money made here than, in this case, the worker who happens to be the stripper.
Then get your ass up and dance. How about that?
Dance, boy, dance. And so it is a law of nature that people will try to get as much as they can, and the more power they have, the more they'll try to get. So since they're the owner of the club, they're using their power. So what can we do about it? Well, that's where the government is supposed to protect you and say, hey, there are certain things they cannot do. Like, hey, taking their wages from them. And that is why the government, if you have a capitalist system, you must have a strong government that regulates those businesses. Otherwise, they will, as a matter of economics and the laws of physics and of nature, they will definitely try to take as much as humanly possible and leave the workers with as little as possible. So that's why you need the government to help. But we've dismantled the government so that business owners, executives, shareholders, etc., get everything, and the workers get as little as possible for you to be just eke out an existence.
You know, the big difference between the United States and Scandinavian countries in the context of what workers deal with in the workplace is that they have strong unions, and the unions negotiate everything on behalf of the workers. So in many of these Scandinavian countries, if not all of them, if I'm not mistaken, they don't have what we refer to here as a federal minimum wage. They don't. So they don't need to rely on strong government because they actually have an organized workforce. We have neither here.
But their government protects their right to organize.
That's true. Yes,
our government
that is true.
Destroys your right to organize.
That's right. That's a good point. Now, this is not without precedent. So this would not be the first strip club to unionize. There was an example that shut down later, but let me give you the details on that. It was the Lusty Lady in San Francisco that ran from the early 80s to 2010s. Since 1997, when unsavory work conditions prompted it to become what is believed to be the first strip club in the US to successfully unionize. The Lusty Lady has been San Francisco's answer to a mainstream strip club industry that many dancers dismiss as exploitative and paternalistic. The dancers belong to the Service Employees International Union, report to a purple-haired shop steward, earn hourly wages and overtime, and terminate workers only with just cause. Now, some at the club see the demise of the Lusties, as the dancers call themselves, as evidence of how so much of what makes San Francisco progressive and subversive is getting pushed out in favor of the sleek and corporate. The nation's only peep show union shop, they'll tell you, was smothered by a man behind what is considered the Walmart of San Francisco's strip club scene. Talk to the landlord, Roger Forbes, and it's about rent. The club didn't make it in May and had to go.
Yeah.
So if you want to help them out, you can donate to the Strippers Action or the Stripper Action Fund. That's on donorbox.org/stripper-action-fund. So there it is. Obviously, they're probably going to engage in a legal challenge if their employer refuses to, accept that they've voted to unionize.
Yeah. And I know it sounds, by the way, we'll put the link down below so you can just click on it if you're watching later on YouTube or Facebook. And guys, it might sound funny, but it isn't. It makes sense. Everybody has a right to organize, and so do strippers.
Of course.
And so that's the most obvious thing in the world. But our society being what it is, I'm sure people will get a snicker out of it. Like, oh, can you believe that it's strippers also want rights? Yeah, I can believe that. There's no reason not to believe that.